Okay, we arrived at week 2 of our digital photography course. I hope you enjoyed the lesson. I just wanted to go through a few reminders about everything that we talked about, exposure. I think that some of you, not naming any names, might have just found the whole thing very difficult to grasp, which is totally fine. It does take a long time to get the hang of this exposure triangle. But remember that it is a triangle. It is always made up of how you've set your aperture, how you've set your shutter speed, and your level of ISO. And if you've forgotten what any of those things are, you can go back to your reference sheet and look them up, or you can ask me. I really encourage you to play around with your camera. You can try it out on the shutter speed mode, you can try it out on the aperture priority mode, but the best advice I have for you is to try and delve straight into going fully manual, and you choose the ISO, you choose the shutter speed, you choose the aperture. And you'll be able to see, because that's the joy of digital photography, you'll be able to see straight away. Maybe you set your shutter speed too high, your ISO wasn't high enough, your aperture wasn't low enough, whatever, blah, 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 blah. So, I just wanted to remind you of a few things. First of all, when we're talking about ISO, that we said that once upon a time, like my first camera that I bought, it only went so high in terms of how much light it could gather in. I'm trying to think how high it went. Maybe the number on the dial went up to like 3,200, and now I don't even know the numbers, they're crazy. So basically our cameras can do a lot more, excuse me, just shifting. Our cameras today, if you have a newer camera, they can do a lot more, like for example, if you're in a dark room, or if it's starting to get dark outside, they can gather in a lot more light than they ever used to be, which is amazing if you have a new camera. If you have an older camera, slightly more frustrating, but you can always get there. So that was just what I wanted to say about ISO. I'm looking at my notes to see what else I wanted to talk to you about. Okay, so shutter speed and motion blur. So just remember that if you're going below a certain speed, like we talked about these fractions, which are really scary, believe me, I hate maths more than anyone. 1/125th, I would say even like, I very rarely go under 200, 1/200th in terms of shutter speed, because I don't want to see that motion blur, unless I'm doing it on purpose, which is very rare. I want the pictures to look sharp. So just remember that if you're going to be playing around and putting that shutter speed lower, you're going to need a tripod. I have a fancy schmancy tripod for my camera, but the tripod that I'm using right now is the GorillaPod, which is absolutely amazing. And I think the GorillaPod would probably hold most of your cameras, because unless you have those heavy, ridiculously expensive lenses, then the GorillaPods, the spider pods even, can do the job. So take a look at those. They may be worth investing in. I promise I'm not going to force you to buy loads of equipment, just a little bit of shopping. And then after shutter speed, why am I thinking that my screen is touchscreen? It's not a touchscreen computer. Aperture. So don't get disheartened if you find the concept of aperture really confusing, because when I was studying it, at the beginning of every single lesson, the teacher would just go, like we used to do a times table, 1, 2, 2, 2, 4. Okay, why did I start 2? 1, maybe I could have started at 8, but actually probably don't know all my 8 times table. The point is, at the beginning of every lesson, he used to make us call out like all the numbers, because it was just, the numbers, like we said, they're just so unintuitive. You know, 1.8 and 5.6, why could they just not be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10? But they're not. So some of you on your cameras may have extra aperture, we call them f-stops, or well, I call them f-stops. It's basically related to the size of the hole, and I'm not going to really bore with you again. some of you have extra ones in between the original ones, and all that is like the camera companies trying to sell to you and say, hey, you can have some extra f-stops for free, and you don't really need them. Like if you have a 5.6, you don't need a 6 and a 7 and a 7 point whatever. What was the point of me telling you that? Aperture can be scary. It can be confusing because when we talk about a lower number, like a 1.8 number, it's a bigger hole. So lower number, bigger hole. Bigger number like f10, smaller hole. So it's the complete opposite of what you would intuitively think. Thank you very much, whoever invented that. He was a man. But the more you practice it, the more you look at it, the more you look back at these worksheets and look at the pictures of the actual aperture hole, the depth of field diagram that I gave you, the more it will start to make sense. And the more that you practice and play around with it, I think I'm going to say that every single week. Practice, practice, practice. Play around with your camera, get to know it, make friends, read the manual. If you can't find the manual, you'll find it online. And that way you'll really, really start to improve your photography and get your camera off the automatic mode, which is my goal for these 5 weeks. Hoping to see your assignments soon. Post them up in the folders that I've put up there, and let me know if you have any questions.